The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, welcome to AmeriCollect and AmeriEBO's webinar. Hello, Mr. Self-Pay, Can You Pay? My name is Nick McLaughlin, and I'm a member of the sales and marketing team here at AmeriCollect and AmeriEBO. I get to be your administrator for today's webinar. If you have a question for us at some point throughout the webinar, please type it in the question box, and we'll get back to you immediately after the webinar. Now on to our presenter. Luke Check started here at AmeriCollect in 2003 while attending the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. He's worked in several departments through the years, leading him to his current position as Director of AmeriEBO, the early out division here at AmeriCollect. So Luke, when should we start calling patients? How often should we be calling them? And which patients pay the most?
All right. Well, thank you, Nick. Good introduction there. And hopefully I can answer a bunch of those questions for everyone. Thank you for taking the time today. I'm sure it's a busy Thursday for everyone. But everybody is, or some of you are probably wondering, well, where are they actually located? The answer to that is Manitowoc, Wisconsin. That's about 30, well, maybe 45 minutes, depending on where you're coming from. Just south of Green Bay, Wisconsin, the home of the legendary Green Bay Packers. About the only thing there is to do in, well, northern Wisconsin is the Packers. Anyways, they take on the Chicago Bears tonight on Thursday Night Football. So if I get a little spacey here, I'm actually, right after this presentation, I'm hopping in my truck and heading up north to go to the game at Lambeau Field. So well, I'm excited to be here and presenting to you guys about a pretty important topic right now. One of the things that I want to kind of get out of the way is this presentation is going to be a lot less about what you should be saying to the people on the phone, and a lot more about, well, let's get the right people in front of me before I even try and figure out what I want to say. So the data that I'm using here, it's from April to June of this year, so it's pretty recent data. You can kind of get a picture of what's happened so far. And this is from AmeriEBO. Again, that's early out, so these are all day one self-pay clients that it's active AR. This is not bad debt collections, just so that everybody's aware of that. So opening up, one of the things that took me a little while to figure out when I'm talking about trying to figure out the best people to put my team in front of, the people that I want to be talking to, it's really two separate questions. The first question is, who's going to pay me? And the second question is, how much revenue is that one call going to generate? So the second question is pretty easy. So I'm not going to really talk much about that at all, because it's easy for you to tell what's the balance size on a particular account. And at the end of the day, I think every one of us knows that if we had to pick, if there's two accounts, a $1,000 balance and a $5 balance, if we could pick which one we'd rather get paid on, it'd be that $1,000 balance. So again, we're going to be concentrating more so on the part that's a lot more challenging for everyone, which is who is going to pay. Starting out, it's really important for everyone, though, to realize that everybody is in a different stage of how well they're working their patient responsibility accounts. Some of us are that nice little shiny blue Geo Metro I have there. You know, we're maybe not making calls yet, or we're maybe making a few calls in no particular way. Some of us may have a little bit more sophisticated. We're that functional Malibu, and I think everybody's goal is to be the Cadillac of working our patient responsibility. So just because you might be sitting in that nice little Metro right now, don't try and shoot for the Cadillac right away. Try and grab a few of the things that I'm talking about and figure out how you can apply that to what you're currently doing today. So starting out, who should I be calling? And I wanted to just kind of give everybody a little intro to this part here too, because we work with a couple of companies that help us figure out the propensity to pay, you know, give us a score to say these are the people that are more likely to pay. But there's a reason why most of you are on this webinar right now, because these things are expensive, and not everybody has the money to pay for something like this. But it's interesting to know that these things really do work. If you look at the balance or the particular accounts that we're looking at, you can see the people that made at least one payment had a much higher score than the people that didn't make a payment at all. And something I don't have a chart for it, but that's even more telling, is if I look at, when I bucket them together, if I look at the smallest or the least collectible bucket of accounts, so the lowest scores, and I compare it to the highest scores, the people with the high scores are 17 times more likely to make a payment as the lowest group. So even just thinking about that this is something that is very important, that we need to make sure that we're trying hard to put the best accounts in front of our team when we're talking to our patients. So if we don't have a score, I'm going to go through just a couple of things here where this can help you try and get closer to what these companies are doing. And there's a lot more of these data things that are looked at. I'm just going to give a couple of the ones that might be easy for you to get to. The first one, and the most important by far, is your payment history. That's something that you have access to. So the people who have paid you in the past, more than likely they're going to pay you again. These are people that care about their bills. Again, they've paid you in the past. Just because one person or a couple of people aren't paying you anymore, maybe they lost their job, don't let that cloud your thinking on the rest of the people. Your strongest, the most important thing you should be looking at is to find the people who paid you in the past, and if they're maybe not paying you as good right now, call them, get in front of them, and these people more than likely are going to get back to being good payers. So something that's kind of interesting, the way that we do everything internally in our office here is that if somebody has a positive payment history, I throw everything else out the window, and that trumps everything. So you can kind of see how important we view payment history. Another very important thing is insurance. Now, a lot of times we get hung up on the fact that there's so many different types of insurance, and Medicaid, Medicare, compared to a commercial, they're less likely to pay for the patient responsibility, and which is true, but you can still get to the point of building that Malibu if you're not doing anything based upon if they have insurance or if they don't have insurance. Look at this particular chart right here. So BAI, that stands for balance after insurance. So your people who have some form of insurance, and again, this could include a Medicaid or a Medicare, and SP self-pay. So true self-pay, they have no insurance. Look at how much more likely people are to pay if they have any type of insurance. So start by getting to that Malibu and basing your work events by putting more of a priority on the balance after insurance accounts. Because again, this isn't just total dollars collected, this is total patient pay dollars collected. 5 times as collectible. Another thing here that I think sometimes, this is something that's very difficult to really to wrap around, is what about looking at addresses and those people who have mail returns? A lot of times we really want to call people maybe a little bit more if we don't have a good address, because we feel, oh, they haven't gotten a statement, I need to do something else to try and equal things out in a way, we think. And I do agree, you probably do want to call, because sometimes it can be something very simple, like it's something a little bit off, that you just have to change one small element and now you have the right address. But you definitely don't want to be calling more on these mail return accounts. In fact, you want to be calling less, because there's a reason why people are not giving the post office a forwarding address. It's because they don't want people to find them. So look at this number right here. And this, remember, this is from this really recent data set, April until June. You can see the people who don't have good addresses, look at that. They're barely even above the bottom line for the number of people. And this is even if they're going to make one payment. This isn't even payment in full. This is one payment, and it's still so few people even make a $5 payment. So very interesting. Really reconsider how you're looking at mail returns. So next step is, when should I start calling? And that's really simple. It's when they have the money and want to pay us. No, the tricky part is how do I know that? And that is the challenge. I think that this is funny right here, but it's actually so true for the environment that we're in right now. I just got paid and it's gone. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about how you're going to strategize to do this, because it is important. People are living paycheck to paycheck, and they might, if they get paid Friday, all the money might be gone right away on Monday. So again, when should I call? The super simple answer, again, not thinking much into it, getting to maybe even a little bit before that Malibu, is sometime between day 30 and 60. You don't want it to be too soon, because healthcare and insurance is confusing. I mean, I can say that for firsthand experience. In the past 2.5 years, I've had a major shoulder surgery, and I've had a broken hand where I had some screws in my hand. And so given what I do on a day-to-day basis, I would like to think I have a pretty good understanding with insurance and just with how all the bills come in. It still gets confusing with everything that happens. So picture that person that has no clue about this entire process and how confusing that process is going to be. They need some time to make sure that they owe the correct amount. And a lot of times people think, well, I'm trying to help them understand. But they might not know, and they might not always buy that you're really trying to help them. So if you mail your second statement on day 30, this is something where you probably don't want to start calling until the statement's landed. And I can speak from firsthand experience with one of our clients. When we started working for them about 2 or 3 years ago, it was just decided when we built the program that we were going to start calling on day 31 or day 32, somewhere in between there. And about 6 months ago, I generally try and meet with our team leaders and our customer service people, the people who are actually calling the patients, to try and figure out what are the things they're seeing a lot, what are the things we can really help them to improve. And for this particular client, I kept on hearing, like, we're always having to explain the statement. There's always these weird questions surrounding the statement. And what we found out was really happening is our client was mailing the statements on day 30. Their second statement went out on day 30. And it was just a weird timing between when they got their first statement and now when they're getting their second statement and when that call is happening. So you really want your statements to work in harmony with your phone calls. And when we were calling on day 31, we weren't even allowing the patient to know that they got a second statement. So again, it's been 30 days since they've thought about their bill. And when we changed it to day 35, so you think just a couple of days later, now they at least have seen that the bill came in the mail. They may not have opened it, but it just changed the whole dialogue of the conversation. And instead of spending a minute or 2 minutes trying to get around the weird situation of the timing, it could go right into discussing the payment and the payment options. So sometimes these really little things, it's just you want to really make sure you have that big picture overview of what's happening. And I have a little bit more of a detailed way that of answering that question of when to start dialing. But first I have to give you a real quick definition, because there's a couple different ways that you can make a phone call. First way is hand dial. We all know what a hand dial is. You pick up the phone, you dial a phone number. Well, I guess I shouldn't say everyone, because nowadays kids may have never talked on the phone, but they can sure text a lot. So I guess everybody over 25 knows what a hand dial is. The second one is predictive dialing, and that's where calls are automatically generated. And when the patient picks up the phone, hello, that's when immediately someone says, hi, is Steve there? For example, the person who's picking up the phone doesn't even know that a dialer is being used. It's just a much more efficient way. Well, it's expensive to buy a dialer, but it's more efficient than hand dialing. Generally, you can make 6 to 7 times as many calls in the same time period as a hand dialer. And the last one is agentless dial, and that's simply put, and there's a bunch of different words for this, but just to keep it consistent in this short presentation, an agentless style is when when you're making a call and the person picks up, they get a recorded message with the option to be connected to a live person. So now getting back to that same question, when should I start calling? Maybe even a little better answer again is looking at splitting up when I'm going to start calling. So maybe in this particular case, and this is actually kind of an example of something that we started for a client of ours about a year or two ago, where for balance after insurance, same thing, 5 days after the second statement is sent, so that's generally around day 35 or 36. But for the true self-pay, we're now making an agentless call on day 20. So that's that recorded message, and it basically lets them know if they have insurance. We want to make sure that they don't have insurance and offer financial assistance, their financial assistance options. So to try and hopefully, if they, these people without insurance oftentimes are the ones that are qualifying for different types of financial assistance. So it's just trying to get ahead of the curve. One thing I can say about this that we've really learned, excuse me as I take a drink of water, that we really learned, originally we did a predictive dial with this first call in True Self Pay on day 20, and it is very, very difficult to pull it off with a predictive dial, because it is so hard to really, really make sure that they didn't give you the insurance information, or that maybe they have the insurance information but nothing really had happened, it was denied. Or there's just a bunch of different things that happen with that data that can slightly change, that when you're making that call and you have a live person there, it makes for a pretty weird call when you tell them that you don't think that they gave you any insurance, but they think they gave you insurance. So it got handled a lot better by an agentless call, and made this go from a kind of a shaky process to something that's working pretty good. So again, just an idea, and you could do things like this in any way, shape, or form that you'd wish, again, depending on what you're looking at. So next question, how often should I be calling? So a basic plan, again, you can just see here, it's kind of combining a few things. Now we're bringing back into the first two questions of are they going to pay me, and what's the revenue that's going to result, and it's kind of combining them back together here. So you kind of look at, you can see the different balance sizes, and then in this particular case, it's segmenting the balance after insurance or your insurance accounts against the people that are true self-pay. So you can just see, and again, this is just an idea, and I just threw numbers in here, so don't go ahead and start doing something like this just by seeing it on this presentation and thinking that it's a good idea. Well, it's probably better than doing nothing, but again, you want to make sure the numbers are right with the number of calls and where your balance thresholds are. But something that would be more advanced here, again, getting maybe closer to that Cadillac, is actually looking at the spacing. So your highest priority ones, yeah, you probably, the general rule of thought is, yeah, let's call them weekly to try and get a hold of them. And again, when I say call weekly, once we talk to somebody, that changes everything. So it's just calling weekly is until we actually talk to the person. So the general rule of thought is weekly, every 7 days. But you should really take it to the next step and do it every 8 days. It's, again, one of those really small things that's going to make a big difference. Because thinking back to that slide that I had with the guy who just got his paycheck and now he's out of money. So if you call every 7 days, picture that, every Monday, I'm going to be calling the same person, calling on Monday, calling them on Monday, calling them on Monday. What happens if I don't have money on Monday? So if by calling them every 8 days, I'm going to call them Monday, next week I'm going to call them Tuesday, the next week I'm going to call them Wednesday, the next week and so on. You get that. So now when I look down at medium, you see, it's kind of this, and actually, sorry, this is 21 days. This is supposed to say 22 days. So scribble that out at me. It's actually supposed to be 22 days. Because we actually kind of apply the same logic here. Now, we can't afford to call, or we don't want to be calling the medium priorities as often as the high priorities, but it's still using that same thought process. So again, this is 22 days. So now it's looking at most people get paid every other week. So it's saying, I'm not going to call every 2 weeks or every month. I'm going to call them, by calling them every 22 days, I'm still going to call them at a different day of the week every time I call, and I'm also going to call them on a potential different pay cycle of theirs, because again, with the whole biweekly thing. And then the low priority. So you see 40 days, same thought process, but again, you can't call them as much, and now it's just monthly. So every time when I call them in the month, it's going to be at a different time throughout the month. So you can kind of get at, you can kind of see where I'm coming from, where it really, some of these little things, it really makes a big difference too on how you're spacing out your calls. I have here a screenshot, and it's a little bit hard to see, but you can see it's a screenshot of, in our system, this is one of our clients that we have set up, and this is a simpler strategy where you can see how it works. So you can ignore the word debtor. That's just how it is in our system. So it's more like guarantor type. But the higher the number, so you see there's 3 different types. It's high likelihood to pay as a 3, a medium likelihood to pay as a 2, and a low likelihood to pay as a 1. Then we combine in the balance here, and to the right, it shows what the markup is going to actually be. So the MD8, that stands for markup day, 8 days away. So you can see on the bottom, the balance is higher, and in this particular one, it's a pretty tight markup. So every 5 days, if they have a higher balance and they're very likely to pay, we're going to be calling them. So you can kind of see how this gets a little bit more sophisticated with defining, and again, the debtor type or the guarantor type, that's defined outside of that, again, using a lot of different variables to try and drive down to who's more collectible. It's kind of hard to talk about some of these things here without briefly diving into discussing the whole patient experience. So you hear a lot of time, I mean, we're hearing it all the time about patient responsibility greatly increasing, what can I do, and how do I get people to pay? So one of the frustrating things that I hear sometimes too is, okay, so you want people to pay, but you're only having your office hours open from 9 until 3. So your call center hours, you want to make sure that you're going to be available when people expect you to be available. So I don't know what that particular time is in your area. Maybe it's 8 to 4:30, maybe it's 8 to 6. But you really want to be available to be there when the patient's calling you to make a payment. An interesting idea I heard at a recent conference from a bigger health system down south. They were having issues with too many calls coming in from noon until 1, and they just couldn't handle it. So what they did is they changed their hours, and they didn't actually change their hours, but they just changed their posted hours from 8 until noon and then from 1 until 5. And what that did is, instead of having just a monstrous plateau from noon until 1, it leveled it out. So some of those calls were distributed either before or after that time frame. So the important thing is that you don't want to close your office hours between noon and 1, but if you're struggling, this might be an idea to try. Again, there's a lot of other things to consider with this too. I mean, what are your patients going to think if they think that you're closing shop up at noon, during the lunchtime? So there's things to think about, but I just thought it was kind of a neat thing I wanted to share on this. Another thing, very simple, that sometimes gets overlooked is when you're answering the phone, or let's just say a person is not immediately available, so a recording has to play, make sure you're saying who they're calling. Hi, this is XYZ Hospital, or this is XYZ Physician Group. We appreciate your call. Please continue to hold until the next. Don't just do the general business office or patient financial services. Sometimes some of the early out companies, they just say, oh, that's how we do it. It's really easy. You just have to let them know that it's important to you, that you want your name to be displayed. It's just something that, again, we're expecting people to pay us, but we're not even helping identify who we are when they're calling us. So little thing, but when should I be available still here? Inbound call stats. Every phone system has some type of a reporting to let you know when people are calling. You should really be breaking this down. Maybe not this sophisticated to know by 15 minutes, but you want to know when you are going to need more people so you don't have to have people waiting for your call too long. It's just a little thing to help you keep that patient experience where you want it to be. Average answer, another important thing you can see in this example down here, at 5 and 6 o'clock, the average answer time is going up. So in this case, I would probably look at this and say, oh, we have to figure something out to either have an extra person available here or, figure things out. These are all stats that we should be looking at. So lastly, as I'm closing down right here, I got a couple of minutes left. I think there's a big question going around on how we should be talking to our patients too. And I chose this picture of a phone on purpose because it's going to be something that's going to be used less and less in the future. You're going to want to have a way to live chat, something so that your patients can communicate with you when they don't have to pick up the phone. Or some people would be able to talk to you while they're at work, if you offered a chat option. See the email thing right here. You look at the utility industry, and how many of us now are still getting a paper bill for your utility bill every month? Very few people. I think 5 years ago was the last time I got a paper bill in the mail for my utility bill. And so we're not even talking about the cost of sending the bill. It's just what your patient wants. So you want to start doing a good job of gathering email addresses to prepare yourself for the future. I hope some of you are doing e-statements right now because that's something that everybody should start doing very soon. You'll notice here that I'm missing texting. You would think that that's something that is widely talked about. And this is a really funny text here because, excuse me, a mom texting her daughter, Mom, what does IDK, LY, and TTYL mean? And you can just picture how the mom is reading this message. Oh, I don't know, but I love you, and I'll talk to you later, Mom. She's, okay, I'll ask your sister. When really she's just defining what these acronyms mean. I think that if you're ever needing of a good laugh, go and Google funny text. It's just, there's so many of these funny screenshots. But yes, texting is very important. It's how people are communicating today. I mean, there's no doubt about that. The important thing to say if you're going to start texting is you really have to brush up on your TCPA knowledge. I have a link here. There's a lot of other resources on what the TCPA actually is because there's a lot of lawsuits and class action lawsuits going on surrounding this act. And people that aren't educated on the TCPA, you don't want to be the one that gets bitten by this. So one final question I have here for you to think about, and this would be more so for the people that are part of health systems or hospitals, but how are you planning to orally notify your patients of financial assistance? With 501R now, if you plan on doing any extraordinary collection activities, you have to orally notify your patients. So how does this fit into your strategy? Because this is going to probably be a detour, a negative thing compared to some of the things I was talking about of working your accounts most efficiently. But you have to have a plan here. So I have again, this is kind of a sliver of helping identify some of the better ways to identify who you should be talking to or how you should be talking to your patients. I plan to talk about some of the other segments of this. So if this has been at all helpful to you, let me know, and I can hopefully put together another webinar in the next quarter to dive into some of the other areas, surrounding patient responsibility. But I thank everybody for taking the time here. Our next webinar you can see right here is on December 8th. And if everybody could do me a little favor and cheer on the Packers tonight. Hopefully the real Aaron Rodgers shows up tonight and not this guy we've been seeing for the better part of the year. Again, thank you so much for your time today, and have a great day.